Cute. Okay, hello, book lovers. Welcome to Authors Love Bookstores, presented by A Mighty Blaze. My name is Kimberly Hensle Lowrance. I host and produce this show in partnership with fellow writer Joe Moldover. Here on Authors Love Bookstores, we bring to you a conversation between an author and her favorite independent bookstore to shine a light on storytelling, creativity, and the small businesses that enrich our communities. We talk books, bookselling, writing, and more, and we are so glad that you're here. Today, I am so pleased to welcome author Sarah McCraw Crow and bookseller Michael Herman to the show. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Let me tell you a little bit about Sarah and Michael. So Sarah is the author of the novel, The Wrong Kind of Woman. And both Sarah and Michael have copies they can hold up to show. It's a great cover. Yay. She is also, thank you for doing that. She is also a longtime magazine writer, editor, and book reviewer. And her articles, essays, and reviews have run in so many different places, including Book Page, the Christian Science Monitor, Family Circle, Ladies Home Journal, Parents Parenting, and the list goes on and on. Her short fiction has won prizes from So to Speak and Good Housekeeping. She earned her MFA from the Vermont College of Fine Arts, and she lives in New Hampshire. Michael Herman is the owner of GIBSON'S Bookstore in Concord, New Hampshire, founded in 1898. And we were telling Michael before we came live, we think that GIBSON'S is the oldest bookstore we featured on the show. And it's the oldest continuously operating retailer in the Concord area and the largest independent bookstore in northern New England. In 2014, GIBSON'S was awarded the coveted Independent Spirit Award, which is given each year to a bookstore that best exemplifies the spirit of the independent bookstore. Michael bought the bookstore in 1994 and in 2013 moved the store to its current location on South Main Street. GIBSON'S is known for its author event, its important role in the community, and the diversity of books on its shelves, from classics to cult favorites to beach reads. Welcome. How'd I do?
Thank you.
Good, Michael?
Great.
All
I should point out, founded in 1898, but not under current ownership.
So how many owners? Are you the fourth or fifth owner? Fifth owner.
Yeah.
Fifth owner from 1890. Wow, that's so fantastic.
Yeah.
And Sarah, GIBSON'S is your local indie, one of your local indies?
Yeah.
We have wonderful bookstores in New Hampshire.
Oh, we do. We have excellent independent bookstores, but GIBSON'S is, I love GIBSON'S for so many reasons, but one thing that is so great about it is like maybe 10 years ago, when all the other bookstores were really struggling and kind of, some were closing and getting smaller. Michael went big, and GIBSON'S I think it tripled in size. It got so much bigger with a big cafe and this beautiful event space. And it's been going, to me, it seems like it's been going really great ever since then.
Thank you for saying so. It was in 2011 that Borders closed, and Borders had been in Concord since March 21st, 1999. Not that I hold grudges, but yeah. And for all those years, they were just terrible to have as competition, because it was like having a 30,000 square foot independent bookstore landed right on top of you.
Yeah.
And when they closed, I really saw an opportunity to show the city what we could do as an independent bookstore, and had a lot of help executing that vision. I'm really glad we can serve the community this way.
I read that you also have a very big toy and kids section. And is this that you bought another business, or can you explain a little bit about the kids section in the store?
Sure. Yeah. When we decided to expand from 4,000 to 12,000 square feet, we knew that we needed to give people a lot of reasons to come in, driving traffic to the store, so that we could justify having that much space in a city about 43,000 people. And so we decided to integrate a toy store with our bookstore, and there happened to be a good one right here on Main Street called Imagination Village. And the owner, Laura Miller, was actually in the process of trying to decide what her next moves would be. So we bought it, and Laura came on for about a year to help us get used to the idea of also being a toy store. And then she moved on, but ever since, we've about 18 or 20% of our sales are in non-book items, which is a really good percentage these days.
And you just opened a cafe as well.
Yes, yes,
I'm,
that took a while.
Michael, I'm tired listening to this is a lot that your bookstore does. And you're so much.
Well, thank you for saying so, and in front of an audience. I appreciate it. Yeah, it was. We leased it out pre-COVID. We leased out our cafe to a great local organization called True Brew Barista, and so they operated in our space, and they were basically our tenants. But then when COVID struck, they closed because nobody could really be open at the time, and they didn't renew their lease. So ever since then, we've been trying to figure out how to reopen, and we just did it ourselves.
Yeah.
Fortunately, my stepdaughter and son-in-law are in the restaurant business, so they gave me
Oh,
a lot of great advice in exchange for free babysitting. And I'm going to owe them free babysitting for about another 50 years, I think. But yes, so we have some marvelous people managing the cafe, part of the Gibson's team, and great menu, and I get coffee 3 times a day, and it's wonderful. It's like a dream
like
come true.
it sounds like a win-win.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was going to ask you, how is it that your store has thrived for over 120 years? Like, what is the magic sauce? But it sounds like it's a lot of what you're just saying. It's pivoting, it's being creative, it's embracing a need in the community, right? It sounds like all these factors came into play, because it sounds like your store in your description is so much more than a bookstore, right? It's like a vital part of the community.
It is, but its mission is to be a great bookstore, and we just try to get to that goal every day. Whatever else we are, we're a bookstore before we're anything else. And I think that a lot of bookstores got more creative during COVID. I know we did. You really focus on your business and what you need to do, and you're not just doing the same old things, and it really sharpened up a lot of people. I know it did for us.
And so, Sarah, this is your local indie, one of your local indies. What was it like when you saw your book on the shelf?
Oh God. Well, I mean, of course, that's always wherever you see it, it's like a dream. You can hardly believe it. But to see it there on the front tables was just like, I don't know, kind of coming home in a funny way. It's like one of those things you think about over the years, because it took me a long time to learn to write fiction. So to have that happen was, I guess it's kind of indescribable, actually.
Oh, I love that. It's like coming home. That's a great compliment to the store, isn't it? That's such a special place. Okay, let's talk about your book a little bit. So congratulations on The Wrong Kind of Woman. Publishers Weekly calls this book, which is your debut, entrancing. Ooh, that's such a great word. As well as smart and thoughtful. Booklist says readers will soar through the smoothly written prose and empathize with the strong characters. Book Page says The Wrong Kind of Woman explores the sublimation of self within a marriage, sexism in the workplace, and the pros and cons of activism versus revolution. These are heady topics, but this slow burn of a novel proves a perfect place to give them serious thought. Ooh. I love this book. I really enjoyed it. And I would love for you to tell our audience a little bit about the book. What's the story, and what was the inspiration? Where did you begin this story?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Kimberly. Well, I guess I'll start with what it's about. So it's kind of, The Wrong Kind of Woman is a campus novel of sorts. And that's because it's set in 1970 on the campus and near the campus of Clarendon College, which is loosely based on Dartmouth College before coeducation. And Clarendon's kind of an Animal House sort of place. So basically the story starts when a Clarendon history professor dies very suddenly in his early 40s and too soon. And his widow, Virginia, is sort of left to pick up the pieces and try to sort things out. And she is pretty quickly forced to reassess a lot of what she thought she knew. And she's someone who feels like a failure as an academic and as a wife and a mom. And she's muddling along, trying to figure out what to do next. And she gets some help from 4 women that her husband really did not like. And those are the only 4 women faculty at Clarendon. and they've been given a kind of derogatory nickname by the male faculty, the Gang of Four. And as she's starting to be friends with them, she begins to reinvent herself. And this group of them start to try to bring a little bit of change to this very traditional campus, and problems arise. So there are two other main characters, and one is Virginia's daughter, who's almost 14, and she is adrift and missing her dad. And then the third character is Sam Waxman, and he's a Clarendon student who he doesn't fit in. He's musically talented and mathematically talented, but he's doesn't fit the Clarendon mold at all, and he's pretty lonely. So that's sort of it in a nutshell, but I should say that it's because we're in 1970, there's the kind of background pressure of the Vietnam War and all the stuff that went along with that. So all the protests and strikes and more radical activism has felt very far away from these characters until pretty recently, and now all of a sudden it's here and it affects them in different ways.
I was struck reading the novel how so many of the issues these characters deal with are still issues we're dealing with today. You know, especially just the assault on women's rights, rise of computers, the way we maybe don't treat our veterans very well. Like it feels like there's, it resonates with a reader in 2021 very, very much. Was that deliberate on your part to tell this story at a sort of a story set in the 70s, but that flashes forward to today, or is it just the unfortunate burden we carry?
It really was not intentional at all. I just, when I started writing these pages, I thought I was just writing about a marriage. And so I have all these pages from Oliver's point of view. And I was just thinking about an unsettled time, but also a very rich time, and wasn't thinking so much about the parallels, but they did pretty quickly become apparent because it is still really tough for women in academia. There's some stuff that has happened at Dartmouth in just the last few years that's kind of appalling. So yeah, it's weird how those things, it's like so much has changed and yet we still have a long way to go.
Right. Michael, you were saying earlier that you had read an early copy of Sarah's book, and that made me think, what's it like to be a reader? How does a bookstore owner survive as a reader? Like, how many books do you read in a regular week? How do you triage which books you're going to read?
Well, you go back and forth on it because there's some books you feel obliged to read because it's your professional responsibility as a bookseller. And then it goes in cycles. Then you rebel against that and say, well, no, doggone it, I'm going to read for pleasure, for a change. And then you say, oops, I better get back to work. And so you just go through those cycles. I read Sarah's book for both reasons. Sarah's been a great supporter of our store, and I was really, really looking forward to reading her book, and I really liked it. I'm almost exactly the same age as Rebecca in the novel, born in 1957. And Sarah, you're a lot younger than that. How did you get these details right? I've been meaning to ask you. I mean, the craze for fondue and the stewardess haircuts and, Stephen Stills on the radio. I mean, how did you sort of inhabit this time that was kind of before your own?
Well, it's kind of funny because I thought I knew a lot about the early 70s, but when I started to think about it, all that was really in my head was like Sesame Street and Close and Play record player and stuff like that. So I did do a lot of research, and it's funny, the ways in were kind of weird. They were like music, listening to thinking about what would somebody like Sam listen to, what would somebody like Rebecca listen to, what would be coming out of a car just driving by, that kind of thing. And then the research was I talked to people who were in college at that time, and read a lot of memoirs. There is a little bit of sort of radical, I guess, faux radical activism. And I read some memoirs of people like that. And I don't know, I just wanted to get things like the TV shows and the music and stuff right. So I was paying pretty close attention to that stuff.
It's good that you did, yeah, because when a writer gets those kinds of details wrong, it just takes you right out of the book, just takes you out of that trance you kind of need as a reader.
For sure.
Yeah. It can really trip you up. Yeah. What made you want to focus in the 70s? I mean, I thought that was really an interesting choice as well, because I feel like, and maybe it's my own bias, but I don't read a lot about that era. And yet it's so rich for fiction, so much to discover, so much was changing in the country.
Yeah. Well, I just have a kind of nostalgia for the 70s. And when I started this, I wasn't thinking politically per se, but I also was very curious about, so I went to Dartmouth and graduated in the late 80s. And by then Dartmouth was pretty co-ed, but there were lots of echoes of the time when it was more like Animal House. And I wondered, like, ever since I was in college, what was it like for the first women who taught there and were finally admitted? And I know it wasn't easy because Dartmouth did not do anything to help kind of integrate the school very well. So I guess that just kind of percolated in, and it kind of, when you are more of a pantser of a writer, that stuff kind of emerges over time, as opposed to saying, I'm going to write about the 70s. It kind of emerged over time.
Michael, I'm curious about the history of the store versus your desire to move the store forward into the future. Do you find that there are changes you want to make that hold you back because the store is so beloved? Or do you find that your community is really embracing change and all the creativity that you have to employ as a small business owner?
I wish I had a grand vision of what the future would be. I don't know. I do know that there were certain versions of the future that I just didn't think were going to happen, no matter how much people were saying they were, like the whole ebook revolution and print being dead and all of that stuff. And I placed a bet in the other direction. That's kind of the last really bold move that I made, because it was a big bet, personally. And, I don't have to go too far into that. Everybody understands what I mean. Yeah, but so I just think that books have been around forever. I mean, the codex is one of our oldest technologies. It's really, it's a perfect technology in a lot of ways, the physical book. And I'm a true believer in what it can do for people, promoting, empathy and knowledge and creativity. And I just believe in the mission. That's not going to change. My grand vision is just to keep getting better and better at that, I think.
What is it like as the owner of the bookstore? Do you get to walk the floor and hand sell?
Oh, yeah.
Or, yeah.
Especially this time of year, when people really kind of need it.
Yeah.
Because, what am I going to get my nephew? I don't know him anymore. He's in college, and so, you make some suggestions. And then, especially when it's this time of year and people just buy books once a year and they're looking for that perfect expression of how they feel about their relatives. And we say, well, you like them, right?
Do you have a go-to book that you recommend? Because we've talked to so many booksellers on the show, and what we hear a lot is you have to listen, right? You have to listen to the customer, but sometimes customers don't know what they want. And so a lot of booksellers have a list of like really good, like their favorites in their back pocket that they pull out. Do you have a list?
There's some oddball books that people just aren't familiar with, that if somebody wants you to do a really deep cut kind of suggestion, my nephew says he's read everything, he's a literary snob. What can I get him? So, I'll take him over to like Flann O'Brien, or, like The Third Policeman, say, well, I wonder if he's read this, or, if they really love fantasy and, but it's been mostly stuff that's purely identified as genre. Say, well, how about this book, The Library at Mount Char, which is over in our fiction section, and it's beautiful, very exciting and exotic fantasy. Ooh. And so, God knows, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, an 800-page literary novel, which is also, so you just kind of, you kind of have to have fun in a professional sort of way. You want it to be a good outcome, but you also want people to be exposed to things that they wouldn't find somewhere else.
Great.
Mhm.
So Sarah, you write both fiction and nonfiction. I mentioned at the top that you have a master's, you have your MFA, but you also
Mhm.
have a master's in journalism.
Yeah.
How do you, so, and you were also, so I find that just really interesting. And you were saying at the beginning that you were like you had to learn to write fiction, right? That was
Mhm.
a skill that you had to cultivate. How do you move between the genres? And we have a lot of writers who watch the show. What suggestion would you offer a writer looking to create a career working in both nonfiction and fiction?
Well, that's a little bit of a hard question right now because when I started my career, it was possible to be a magazine editor or a magazine freelancer because there were many more magazines. Like most of the magazines that I worked for or wrote for they're out of business now, so they don't even exist. And they used to pay pretty well, but not anymore. So I think that if you're trying to do both, I think you have to just be pitching. You have to have your nonfiction hat on and be pitching all the time, and then kind of break out a little space to do your fiction and devote that time and that part of your brain to it, because it is sort of two different brains for writing nonfiction versus fiction. So, and right now most of my nonfiction is just book reviews, so that's very different than journalism or
Right.
service articles.
So you launched your debut novel during the pandemic. You're continuing to promote your novel during the pandemic. How has that experience been for you, and how has it sort of impacted what you do next with your writing?
Oh gosh. So launching during the pandemic was not ideal in many ways, as we all know, because I couldn't go to any bookstores. Like all the places I thought I would go, even without a large book tour, I still thought I would visit, I don't know, bookstores in Virginia and Maryland and wherever we have friends. And so, of course, that didn't happen. But the flip side is, like we were talking about with all the Zooms earlier, that I could have my launch events with authors one who's in California or one is, very far away. And that was really neat and special. And so that was great. And I will say that a lot of the other people who had debut novels in 2020 kind of banded together so we can kind of share our misery and, give tips to each other. So it's been an interesting experience, but we all have our kind of pandemic war stories of things that did not go right, or silver linings. There definitely have been some silver linings, but yeah.
As we know, it is so difficult to get a book to be published to begin with. So it feels like the world throws up lots of barriers. So you've climbed a mountain, right? An important one.
Yes, and I think most people, you realize almost afterwards, you realize more, and then it's like, oh my God, that is tough, and it can be a little bit. I suspect that's one reason that some people do have trouble with the second novel, because you know more than you did when you were just alone writing the first thing, sort of for yourself, and then when you know how hard it is to sell a novel, then I think that can have a kind of weird converse effect on you.
Interesting. One of the things we've heard, Michael, is that the supply chain is really tricky right now for so many businesses, but especially bookstores. I keep seeing announcements from bookstores saying, if you want anything by Christmas, you have to order. I think today a lot of people have their deadlines. How has this supply chain mess impacted GIBSON'S? How is the store doing with all this?
Well, one thing we did was we placed some bets on which titles were going to really take off and be important titles for the season, whether they were titles that we thought would be bestsellers nationally or just titles we wanted to recommend to people. And we placed large orders for those titles by our standards. And we have boxes of books all over the store, on top of bookcases, in the office, under the windows. Just to hedge our bets against those running out like around December 15th. But otherwise, and I think other bookstores make this point too, is that it's an ideal season for hand selling, because if we don't have this book that you want, Mr. Customer, we have 6 others we can recommend.
Yeah.
and we've got a store full of books, even if it's not exactly that book that's that's still being printed and won't be here till February. Even if we don't have that one, we have these others that are really good. And so we're just exploring the possibilities of what we call backlist, the older titles right now.
That is the beauty of an indie bookstore. Walking in and saying, I'd like this, and what can you recommend? I mean, I find an indie bookstore is the most dangerous place because I always walk out with like a couple more books than I had anticipated buying, because the booksellers listen, right? And fall in love with the book and want to tell everyone about it. And
algorithms can't really do this. I mean, not yet. I don't think they ever will.
No.
Let's hope not. Yeah.
No, it's that quintessential human element, right? That you need, that we all need, actually. If I walk into Gibson's, which is now on my list to do, is there a section for New Hampshire authors?
Yes.
Because that's another fascinating part about indie bookstores, is the ability to have a local spotlight. And you have a lot of authors we have a lot of authors in New England, but you have a lot of authors in New Hampshire. What kind of books would be fine on that shelf? Fiction, nonfiction, history?
A lot of fiction, a lot of history and local color, even like roadside geology, that sort of thing, for people who want to explore the White Mountains. And for a long time there, we had, I guess, 4 of the most important poets in the country living within 50 miles of here. We had Donald Hall, Maxine Cumin, Charlie Simic, just very, very important poets. Only Charlie is still with us, but, New Hampshire, punched above its weight class for poetry and for a lot of things.
For sure.
Yeah. It's a beautiful state, right? Lots of inspiration. Sarah, what are you reading now during this time of holiday gift giving and winter approaching? You said you write book reviews. Is there something that you've been reading that you'd want to recommend to our viewers?
Yes.
After they read The Wrong Kind of Woman, of course.
Yes, I would love for them to read my book. But okay. These are some books I've already read, but can you guys see that? That's Lauren Groff's Matrix. It is so, so good. It is not at all what I thought it was going to be, and her range is incredible. It is a story of a 12th century nun who runs a convent. She's based on Marie de France, and I have never read anything like it. And I love Lauren Groff already, but I really love that book.
It's extraordinary.
It's great. I loved it too.
Yeah.
And this is one book, I'm sure Michael's read all these books, but I usually read women writers, but 2 of my favorite books this fall, or recently, were by men. And one is Morningside Heights by Joshua Henkin. I love this book. It's kind of like Meg Wolitzer or Laurie Colwin's story of a long marriage in New York. And then, of course, Cloud Cuckoo Land, which I'm just very curious to know what other people will think of it. I was really kind of blown away by it. And I was kind of skeptical when I started, but it spans centuries and has like 7 point of view characters and jumps around in time. But it's beautifully written and beautifully plotted with those tiny little short chapters.
I loved it. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, I haven't read it yet. It's on my list. And Michael, you loved it?
I did. Yeah. At first I was afraid it was going to be kind of like a David Mitchell sort of like difficult, thorny thing. Because it's kind of like, at least in the basic description, kind of like Cloud Atlas, but it's really a lot more accessible than that. I thought it had a lot of heart. I really loved it.
A lot of heart. That's so true. Yeah.
I love me some David Mitchell, complicated, plotting, century.
Did you read Utopia Avenue?
I did.
Yeah, that's speaking of accessible. I mean, with all the craze for the Beatles right now, it's very late 60s music scene. I thought it was very well done.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And we're talking about Utopia Avenue by David Mitchell. We'll put links to all these books below for our readers to click, and then I said readers, for our viewers to click and become readers. So I know we asked you earlier, Michael, for some suggestions, and you had a few, but is there anything else in the store right now that you'd want to highlight for our viewers for the holiday season?
Well, right now I'm running through that cycle I was talking about where I'm sort of reading for my own pleasure and not, I'm just kind of in denial that it's the Christmas season where I'm supposed to be reading a million books to recommend. So I'm reading The Dawn of Everything by David Graeber, which is an 800-page work of anthropology and history about how humanity kind of got off the rails and could get back on the rails. It's very complicated but accessible at the same time, and it's taken me like 3 weeks to read it, and I'm almost done. So that's kind of a little act of rebellion by me right now. So, but I really do like it, and he passed away at like the age of 59, I think, taken from us too soon. Really a genius of a writer.
Okay. That sounds like a perfect book for that nephew you mentioned earlier who knows everything.
Oh yeah, that nephew, he won't know what hit him.
Sarah, are you working on another novel? Of course, our viewers want to know that.
Oh yeah, I'm working on a couple of things, and one is actually set partly in the early 80s, so I guess I'm moving forward in the decades. And I'm in a kind of weird middle place with that, so I don't know where that's going, but I have something else that's possibly set in the 70s, and then something else that may be set in the 20s. So I'm a little bit of a mess right now, but I'm just trying to stay in touch with these projects and keep them moving forward.
Okay. Great. Well, we'll keep our eyes peeled for when your book comes out into the world. And Michael, I know we mentioned before we came live that the store is doing online events. And so we're going to put a link below in the broadcast for people to check those out. Is there a particular event that you have coming up that you'd want to highlight for our audience? Anyone you're excited about?
Well, yeah, tomorrow night, Dr. Brene Brown is joining us. She's joining a lot of independent bookstores simultaneously. And that's a fantastic event. And then I think on December 7th, we have Michael J. Fox along with other bookstores. Yeah, the thing about these virtual events is that the publishers can like gather independent bookstores together, and we all get these great authors that ordinarily we'd never have a shot at having in person. So the virtual events can be a real benefit.
So Brene Brown is promoting her new book, which is called Atlas of the Heart.
Atlas of the Heart, yes.
And then what's Michael J. Fox's new book?
Memoir. I was afraid you were going to ask me the title.
That's okay. That's okay. We can find it
in the chat.
We can find it and put it in the chat.
Oh gosh, it's right on the tip of my brain.
That's okay. That's pretty easy to find, and we'll make sure it's there.
I think it has his face on the cover, so you can tell it's his book. Yeah.
Oh, No Time Like the Future, Michael J. Fox.
Oh, there you go. Perfect. Oh, of course. Yeah, I knew it was a pun on Back to the Future. So.
Oh,
if you don't mind, I have a question for Sarah. That
yes,
you had pages and pages of from Oliver's point of view. That would make this a totally different novel. I mean, different.
So different, and yeah, I mean, so that's kind of where I start, is with a character in a sort of predicament or just thinking or whatever. And so I had all these pages, like I know where he went to prep school and all this stuff, all of his laments and about his midlife crisis that he was having that we never learn about, really. I mean, there's sort of hints of it, but you don't really know what happened. But it was, Virginia was sort of my main character, and I realized that nothing was going to happen in this novel if Oliver didn't move out of the way. So I had to kill him, and then things could get started. Yeah.
So it was murder.
Yeah. So I do have tons of pages in his point of view, but he just didn't. It was like this whole other novel, basically. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it sure would have been.
Oh, that's really interesting. It's also really important for viewers to understand that sometimes an author has to go through this whole process of writing pages and pages for a character that might not make it in the final book, but it helps inform the story.
I think so. I mean, and that is actually a writing exercise that you can do if you are, if you're kind of stuck in something. You can like turn it around and try the scene from a different character's point of view, and you sometimes get a whole bunch of different information, or not information, but you see it differently, and it can move the story forward. Even if you don't use it in the novel, it gives you something to work with. So yeah, it's a weird process. And I think a lot of writers do proceed by writing and then discarding and then writing and then discarding, which is not very efficient.
There's such a mystery to it, though. It's like, you know more about the characters than the reader does, but if it's not in the book, is it true about the character? It's I love fiction. It's great.
Yeah, it is a very weird, I mean, I'm not a very woo-woo person, but it is a weird process.
There's some romance in there too. This idea of, falling in love with your characters, creating this whole story, and then like sending it out into the world and having this one particular view of how they interact and who they are. But yet your viewer brings their reader brings their own history, right? And that creates just like a different interpretation.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's also all the other ways the novel could have gone, all the other decisions that you could have made at any point that, and maybe they aren't really decisions, they're just sort of things you feel. And so you go in that direction. Yeah. I mean, I think about that, like each novel I read, like that could have gone in this direction or that direction. It could have been this story. It could have been a million different stories. Yeah.
And we can get all those stories at Gibson's Bookstore. Michael, we always ask booksellers this question. Please finish this sentence for us. Running a successful bookstore is part hard work, part luck, and part what else?
Say it again.
Running a successful bookstore is part hard work, part luck, and part what else?
Gotta be love.
Love.
You gotta love it. You certainly aren't in it for any material rewards, and it's still retail, so it's hard work. So you really have to love what you do.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us here today on Authors Love Bookstores.
Thank you, Kimberly.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. I now will make a pilgrimage up to New Hampshire to come.
It's worth the trip. It's a beautiful bookstore. It's just a beautiful space, and it is filled with books as well as other things. So it
sounds very special, Michael. Like the legacy that you're continuing, and also the wonderful place that you're creating for your community. Thank you.
Well, we couldn't do it without writers like Sarah.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
To our audience, we've included the link below to purchase The Wrong Kind of Woman from Gibson's Bookstore. It's a great gift for the holiday season for the book lover in your life. Thank you to Sarah and Michael for being with us today, and to our audience for tuning in. If you liked today's show, and we hope that you did, please subscribe to A Mighty Blazes page on Facebook so you can get notified about all of our other events, or hop over to our website, amightyblaze.com, to sign up for our weekly newsletter that gives you a rundown of all of our shows. And we'll be back here next week for another episode of Authors Love Bookstores. Until then, be well and keep reading. Thank you.
Thank you.